I kept these two dreams to myself for a few weeks as I integrated the implications of what I had seen and psychologically began to prepare for eclipse season coming up. By mid-May, however, I decided that I would keep the first dream to myself and a couple of close friends, but that I would be very open about the second dream and the White House going into a giant crack. I basically was telling everyone I knew: Twitter, my sisters, my mom, my dad, any of my friends who would listen to me, family. I was like, the USA is energetically collapsing right now, and it was my feeling that it was only a matter of time before we would start to see this like manifesting in more overt ways, though what those ways were going to be or how long of a process this would be, I didn't know. By the end of May 2020, we were approaching eclipse season yet again, and I was particularly curious as to what was about to happen, as I knew in Vedic astrology that this was the last eclipse season that we were going to be having with the nodes Rahu and Ketu in the Gemini and Sagittarius axis, as they were going to be shifting out into the Taurus and Scorpio axis in September, as the nodes change the axis every 18 months. And observationally over time, I had noticed that when you go through the eclipse season right before the nodes shift out, that many old cycles complete, but new stories that will emerge more prominently in the subsequent cycle of eclipses would be like seeded. The last time this happened was January 2019, when I briefly dated Joss again, and then shortly thereafter was basically thrust into like all of my ancestral healing saga, as my 12th house Jupiter was getting majorly eclipsed by all of this. So by this point, given everything that I had gone through since then, I couldn't have the nodes out of this axis in my chart fast enough. The first eclipse was June 5th in a nakshatra in sidereal Scorpio called Jeshta. And due to my casual studies of Vedic astrology over the years, I knew that this would likely be evoking the themes associated with the myth of Indra, who is the deity of this nakshatra and is the king of the gods in the Vedic system. In the myth, Indra cheated on his wife with his guru's wife, and his guru, of course, found out about this and cursed him to be covered in 1,000 vaginas. And Indra then, of course, had this fall from grace due to being exposed and then being covered with all these vaginas. And he went to the forest to do all of these penances and spiritual practices and fire sacrifices and all these different things. And the goal of all of this was that he needed to transform his humiliation into humility in order to evolve in his consciousness due to this incident. Eventually, after doing all of these things in the forest in isolation, the 1,000 vaginas were transformed into 1,000 eyes, and he became known as the 1,000-eyed one. And this symbolized how he was able to transform his experience into wisdom, and he was reinstated onto his throne. Because this nakshatra is associated with billionaires and the ruling class due to the Indra kind of archetype of kings and emperor kind of vibe, I knew intuitively that we would be seeing, or likely be seeing, falls from grace of patriarchal control systems on a macro level in some way, and that these people and systems would also, inherent in that, have the opportunity to redeem themselves through transformative justice work and spiritual work if they were conscious enough to kind of understand what was happening here and take those actions. The reason why I mention all of this, for one thing, is because I believe that the whole White House falling into a giant crack is kind of a part of this motif. But I also mention it because I knew Joss is a Jeshta moon, and in Vedic astrology, your moon sign is your most important placement. And since I knew his moon would be getting eclipsed and extremely detoxed as a result of this, I was, despite myself, very curious as to how these upcoming eclipses would be affecting him too. In the 2-week lead up to the first eclipse in Jeshta, the George Floyd murder happened, and people were taking to the streets in a major way. And I was amazed, honestly, to realize that Minneapolis was playing such a key role in all of this, as I was like realizing that I was led there for a reason back in August of 2019, and why I'd had such a heightened experience while I was there. I was like, oh my gosh, like it was all kind of leading up to this incident and what it means for the collective. And that there was just a lot that was being transmuted there as a kind of like hot spot in the grid. And during this time, the energies were obviously so intense, and I was just kind of hunkering down in my apartment, just like doing a ton of spiritual work while like scraping by at my day job over Zoom. And I was honestly just extremely fatigued and just having a lot of dreams and clearing a lot, and kind of just like doing my best to just exist, basically. By late June, I was led to go on a little weekend getaway to Lake Arrowhead for the solar eclipse in Gemini, to do some grid working there by myself, and of course, more emotional purging because story of my life. A little over a week after I got back, and right before the final eclipse in the 3 eclipses cycle that we were in that summer in Sagittarius, Ray Fisher, who is an actor who starred in the Justice League movie that Joss had done massive reshoots on in 2017 before we had reconnected, or in the midst of that. Ray Fisher started to speak out about Joss in the media, and he was making claims of workplace abuse by him and racism, as well as other people who were associated with this production at Warner Brothers. Of course, knowing that Joss has Jeshta Moon and that he was going to be detoxed, I was not really surprised. I was just kind of like, okay, here we go again. This is happening. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't really expect that it would manifest in this way, but given how I had been to Minneapolis, and then this George Floyd thing was happening, and then Ray Fisher speaking out was kind of catalyzed by a lot of what was happening with that, I could kind of trace the trail a little bit in terms of how all of these karmas were kind of like connected in a giant soup of stuff. But at the same time, I definitely felt like I was losing the plot even more than before. I really didn't know what to make of any of this. Joss was still obviously living in England with his girlfriend working on the Nevers, and probably not even remembering that I existed. And he also was not publicly responding to Ray Fisher's allegations, which was pretty concerning to me. And I just want to say that at this point, I didn't experience this side of Joss, and so I can't speak to like the validity of these claims. I wasn't there. But I also have no reason to doubt Ray Fisher. And so, I don't doubt him. And I believe that it was courageous of him to speak out, doing so knowing what the ramifications could be for him and his career. And I just really want to emphasize that I feel that, this is a necessary part of getting Hollywood to be in a better place, is to call out, workplace abuse, and to really make an effort to have there be healthy workplace environments and creative environments in this town. Meanwhile, on my end, I had my finished script finally, but I still had no reps, and I didn't really know how to go about networking in Hollywood during a pandemic after I had been so unplugged for so long from all of that world. And I didn't really suspect anyone was buying anything at the time anyway, even though incidentally, there were a lot of conversations about Native rights going on at the time. So it's like I knew the zeitgeist was here. It's just I didn't know where I fit into any of this at this point. Mostly, I was just incredibly depressed and I just wanted everything in my life to change. By this point, we had been in lockdown for a few months, but I had been in spiritual isolation for a lot longer than that. I was beginning to wonder if I would ever have an actual life ever again. And again, it was just a lot of exhaustion, dreams, and emotional detoxing while working at my day job over Zoom. And it was just relentless. Meanwhile, as the summer weeks went on, negative articles about Joss in the press continued to come out consistently. And Ray Fisher never backed down in his speaking out about this issue and was demanding an internal investigation by Warner Media into what had happened. Then, as soon as eclipse season ended and we had the new moon on July 20th, 2020, my phone started to like glitch out intensely, and all of my notes and text messages, except for like 2 people, were wiped completely off my phone, deleted forever. On top of this, I also got word that Don Jesus, the Shipibo shaman who I worked with in Peru, in the 2 ayahuasca ceremonies I had done, including that ceremony at Lake Titicaca, that he had suddenly passed away. And given what I had transmuted back in the spring and knowing how deeply connected it was to the ceremonies that we were doing in Peru, especially at Lake Titicaca, this made me feel like kind of solemn. Like I felt kind of dark about it. On the other hand, I knew that this was a huge karmic clearing that had just happened and that things were about to change in a major way. Unfortunately, with all of my notes getting deleted, I lost a lot of dream records and I was kind of upset about it. But shortly after this, I began having a lot of very important dreams and downloads. And I realized that I was getting hit with the eclipse energy kind of after the fact. Like sometimes you're more affected in the lead up and other times you're kind of more affected in the aftermath. And I realized that I was basically emotionally detoxing the whole time so that I would be able to be in a place to receive all this new information. One thing I was shown around this time is that we would be in this COVID thing for 2 years. And so I knew that we would probably not be meaningfully out of the woods until maybe like summer 2022. By August, I was shown that I was meant to incorporate music into my creative life and work, and that I was meant to develop my voice to become a singer. This is because my voice has been so purified by all of the spiritual processes and things that I've been through that it activates and detoxes people and heals through vibration. I also felt intuitively that if I developed my voice as a singer, that I could use it to heal the scars and fascia damage in my throat and chest that I was still dealing with as a result of my injury that I sustained in the summer of 2018. All of this made a lot of sense to me as I had just spent the past several years writing about music, and I knew that my throat injury had to do with how I had given up the power of my voice in a past life. Around this time, I also met this amazing Akashic Records practitioner who I had been connected with on Twitter, and her name is Denise. And through our new friendship, I began to realize that music and especially like ecstatic states that you can achieve through music are going to be of growing importance as we begin to transmute greater levels of the collective shadow on a mass scale. We basically are going to have to rave our way into the new age. Aside from Katie, I didn't really have many other close friends on the path, and so I felt very blessed to have met Denise in person and become her friend, and it was very illuminating to swap downloads and insights with her. In mid-August, I had a dream in which I went to confront the guru who had raped me on the astral plane and karmically detox him and his field in the dream. And when I found him in this dream, he was very shocked to see me. And then he quickly pretended to not be shocked. But of course I had like caught it instantly. Like he couldn't help himself. Like he kind of like showed it and then tried to erase it. And then he was like, Erin, I remember you. And I said to him, how could you forget? And then I ran off knowing that the deed had been done. A few days after this, on August 20th, Ray Fisher announced that Warner Media would be launching a third-party internal investigation into the abuse allegations on the Justice League reshoots. And at this point in the story, I would just like to say, for the record, that while I was at this time an employee of Cartoon Network, a subsidiary of Warner Media, and that I had been for the past, majority of the past 5 years during the whole AT&T merger saga, I did not participate in the Warner Media investigation of Joss because I do not feel that any meaningful change can occur in these systems as they exist today. And even if I did, I also felt like these HR people would not have the capacity to understand what the fuck I was talking about. Like, you guys who have gotten this far in the story can understand that this is a complex, multidimensional situation. So I just decided I was going to sit back and, get my popcorn and just like watch this unfold. A week or so later, towards the end of August and the beginning of September, I was intuitively led to Mount Shasta for the full moon, where I did a lot of spiritual work and clearing and emotional purging, obviously. And I was having many dreams that were giving me clues about what was to come. When I got to the top of Mount Shasta to meditate on the night of the full moon, I had a really important epiphany about my TV project. And while I had finished the script and nothing had come of it because of COVID, I still had some work to do on the pitch and like the macro story build out stuff. And so I decided that I was going to at some point try and focus my energies on that. And I felt pretty reinvigorated as I returned home. In September, after I returned from Mount Shasta, I began getting downloads that implied to me that we were going to collectively, at least in America, move into becoming city-states in the future. And this decentralization of power is important so that we may healthily kind of individuate into sovereign beings on these different levels and groups of beings. And then from that place, we can safely unify more organically without being caught up in all of these patriarchal cult dynamics that were beginning to disintegrate. Shortly after getting these downloads, the nodes shifted into the Taurus and Scorpio axis. And this is a time of deep emotional purging for me. And I was having a lot of dreams, and I was having dreams that more people were going to come out in the press against Joss, and just, all of these just detoxing dreams. In early October, we had the full moon in Uttara Bhadrapada, which was the same nakshatra that the new moon was in back in that whole lunation cycle when I was having all those clearing dreams from the grid, and which ended with the White House falling into a giant crack, which was also when the moon was in Uttara Bhadrapada, shortly before the subsequent new moon. And on the full moon in Uttara Bhadrapada, I had an incredibly intense dream in which I was being initiated in the Amazon by all these indigenous shamans. And then I was being made to go to like the Liberty Bell against my will. But before I could get there, I just started to like violently vomit into a toilet, like in the dream. And I woke up from the dream like basically gagging and I was incredibly nauseous. And I remember like right after I woke up, Denise texted me and she was like, "Are you okay right now?" And I was just like, no. I then went to my bathroom and threw up for real. Shortly after this, I got the download that I needed to also be a DJ. And I bought a DJ controller. And by this point, I was just like, Jesus, take the wheel, because I have no idea where this plot is going anymore. I signed up for some online classes to develop my voice and work on like music production stuff and this DJ thing. But before I could finish them, I was psychically attacked again on the astral plane. And it was by someone who I had trusted. And I knew that it was a karmic clearing and that this person didn't do this intentionally. But I was actually like severely traumatized by this. And I basically didn't get off my couch for like 2 weeks. And I was like barely eating and like mostly sobbing and sleeping and like not showering. And I was very low functional. And it was definitely the worst I had felt in a long time, and definitely the worst I had felt since the pandemic began. I couldn't help but feel like every time I tried to like pick myself up and do something with my life that I would like get slapped with some like next level initiation and just have to like go into the void and just start all over again from scratch and try and work to get functional again. Meanwhile, Ray Fisher was continuing to slam Joss in the media, and Joss was refusing to even comment or take responsibility or anything. And I was just so depressed and exhausted by everything. And I didn't really know how I was supposed to continue on with my life like this. Everything was just feeling really dark and impossible. After a couple of weeks of me being in the void of death, I slowly began to emerge from this unfortunate state, and the election went down. And I was just like, really? Like, Joe Biden? Like, we're doing this? Like, I wasn't sure who was going to win in the end, honestly. I, at this point, felt it just didn't matter who was president because the White House is going into a giant crack. And so when I voted in the election, I actually didn't even vote for president because I no longer believed that it was a legitimate position of power at all. And so I was just kind of sitting there like feeling a little bit gaslit because everyone was celebrating. And it's like, I understand why people were feeling that way, but I also kind of just felt like this is not what's actually happening though. And so I kind of just felt like even more isolated in my own kind of experience of what it was that I was clearing versus what was kind of happening. A few days after this, my grandmother died. And while she had been ill for some time, this triggered a huge ancestral release and healing in my family. And for the first time since the pandemic started, I quickly prepared to travel long distance to Houston for a long weekend to be with family in the aftermath of this. And this also coincided with the beginning of the next eclipse season, with the nodes now officially fully in the Scorpio and Taurus axis. The day before I left for Houston, I was alerted by one of my neighbors that a notice of demolition sign was put on the front of our building. And when I went out to go and see it, it all of a sudden just hit me. I live in a small white house looking building that is going to be demolished. And the White House is going into a giant crack. The macrocosm is in the microcosm. This whole time, I think I've been living in a microcosm of the White House. On the heels of this revelation, and just as eclipse season was starting, I flew to Texas. And it was a pretty intense trip with my family. And I did see my aunt's friend again while I was there. And we had a whole long talk. And at one point, I was just like, yeah, I've been going through a lot of transformations this past year and a half. And towards the end of our conversation, he looked at me and he said, "You're about to learn what transformation really means." And I was just like, upon my return from Houston, I took a week to integrate. And at this point, I knew that my job at Cartoon Network was ending at the end of February, and that because of the AT&T merger, the future of the show was kind of a question mark. I had no idea what the fuck I was supposed to do next. 2021, my supposed big year, was fast approaching. My apartment was set to be demolished, and the end of my 20-year-long thrice-cursed Venus Dasha was ending in late March. I had no idea how I was going to turn any of this around or what was about to happen. Then, on November 25th, I saw an article come out in the trades saying that Joss had exited the Nevers. And, well, he said he left, but okay. We all know he was fired. It was pretty obvious that he had been, investigated, and then Warner Media just probably wanted to cut their losses and, get rid of him in the layoffs since he was becoming kind of a PR liability for them. That's my interpretation anyway. But in the back of my mind, I was like, I didn't really get how the timeline would work back when all this was announced in the summer of 2018, right? But now that he's fired, he's coming back to LA, presumably, right before 2021 happens. What are the odds of that? On the other hand, this whole situation of his Jeshta moon, fall from grace, now seems incredibly radioactive, and he was seemingly refusing to take any accountability for his behavior, and presumably he was also still with this other person. And so yet again, I didn't really know what to make of any of this. Shortly after this, I decided my solo Thanksgiving plans would be to smoke some weed and eat dim sum and watch The Queen's Gambit. Like the OA 4 years earlier, I felt particularly called to watch this show, Queen's Gambit, and I got a ton of downloads while I was watching it. The next day, I recorded an episode of the Real Witches of the End Times podcast with Mana Aylin, in which I spoke a little bit about these downloads that I was getting and how they related to what I saw as an emerging trend of people tapping into their own genius to play the game of life instead of the game of life playing them. This whole reality I was beginning to sense was about to go full RPG in ways never before seen. This episode of this podcast was totally unplanned, like all the podcasts I've been on, but the episode eventually became about living our own myths. Shortly after this, in early December, I began getting a ton of downloads about what was happening on a macro energetic level on this planet. And essentially what I was shown is that there is a dark, feminine, penetrating force that is disrupting and destroying cult programming across the board, but of course including patriarchy, which is a byproduct of that, and recalibrating our collective experience and understanding of gender identity and sexuality expression. Like, there's basically an energetic retemplating happening as these patriarchal notions of gender binary are dispersed with. This is not to say that the binary doesn't exist, but more so that there is an ever-emerging space for fluidity within it, rather than being rigidly confined to one or the other. This is helping us to essentially become spiritual hermaphrodites, for lack of a better term, because the final stage of the heroine's journey, which is of course what the whole Rise of the Divine Feminine incorporates, is the balancing of the divine masculine and the divine feminine energies, which of course I've been so involved in for so long on my path. I was also shown that the imminent Pluto transit into sidereal Capricorn would be a major shift for the world, and that it would initiate Vedic astrology into taking the outer planets into deeper consideration, and that it would also be commencing the Pluto return of the United States of America. And that also kind of further confirmed to me that we were entering a time of a kind of major transformational reckoning of this country. On top of all of this, another thing that was yet again becoming prominent in my experience was the whole TV becoming a reality thing. And I noticed for the first time in early December that WandaVision was coming out in January, and Disney released a new trailer for it around this time. And I had not heard about any of this until this point, and I realized that it was so significant. Like, not only was the show basically all of the things that were basically happened to the actual reality that I had been suspecting for years, but also the show is centered on two characters, Wanda and Vision, whom Joss had introduced into the Marvel Cinematic Universe when he wrote Age of Ultron, which of course is what was the movie that like started basically our whole like serial relationship. So I was just like, wow, like this is getting to even crazier levels than I ever thought before. I was just like, how meta is this going to get? Shortly after this, I heard a loud crash in my neighbor's apartment. And then the following day, when I went to take the trash out of my apartment to the dumpster, I saw that there was this shattered TV right outside the dumpster. And I knew that it was what I had heard the previous night, my neighbor's TV. And I saw that shattered TV and I was just like, holy shit. A few days after this, on the day of the Jeshta eclipse on December 14th, 2020, I had a reading with a Vedic astrologer named Joni Patri. It had been a while since I had gotten my chart read, and I was curious to see if she had any nuggets of interesting information to give me. We had a whole chat in which she was telling me that I am here to speak my truth to the world, and that I have a big spiritual mission that likely involves my life partner, and that I have this thing in my chart where like I always tell the truth. And we also spoke about the whole UFOs thing and how we both suspected that some major reveals were on the horizon with all of the UFOs, especially because by that point it was known that there was going to be this congressional UFO report that was set to be released the following eclipse season in June of 2021. Meanwhile, like as she's giving me this reading, she just keeps saying over and over again, like, you are so intense. You are so intense. You are so intense. And then she was like, you basically have to be this intense though. And I was just like, yeah, I know. Anyway, eventually, towards the end of this reading, she gave me some important dates to look out for. And two of them, the first two, were approaching pretty quickly, February 10th and February 24th. For the first date, February 10th, she was like, something will happen and it will be fiery. And I was just like, oh, okay. And then for the 24th, she was like, your destiny will be activated on this day. And so I kept these 2 dates in my back pocket, as I knew that my Capricorn stellium, where all of the excretory system stuff is, was about to have a giant stellium transit on top of it, like so many planets. And that as a result, shit was probably about to get real in some way in my life yet again. I just didn't know how or what it was going to be. All I knew is my job at Cartoon Network was ending at the end of February, on February 26th, and that I just needed to somehow power through it all and make it to the end of my Venus Dasha in late March on the day of the spring equinox, and that hopefully my life would somehow, by some miracle, begin to drastically improve with the start of my highly anticipated Sun Dasha. A couple of weeks after my reading with Joni Patry, I was led to finally bite the bullet and give my first DJ live stream on Twitch. And I decided to do it for a New Year's Eve party since I had nowhere else to go. And about 24 people showed up. I had decided on the DJ name Serpentine, and I called my event Transformation, since I knew I wanted to establish myself as someone in trance music. I had a really fun night, and I felt like it was a successful first venture into DJing, especially considering I had literally no clue how to do any of this shortly before all this happened. As I entered into January 2021, I was plunged into more intense and deep shadow work, and it was some of the most intense shadow work I had ever gone through thus far. But I was also having like nonstop visions and dreams and like game-changing downloads and of collective energies and like about my own path and all these things. And it was just a really intense. And the evening of January 5th was particularly intense. And I was like sobbing and like violently dry heaving for hours. And it was just really hard. And the next day, the insurrection happened. And I remember Denise texted me that following day and was like, "Are you okay right now?" And I was just like, no. The fact that I purged so deeply right before this incident happened at the Capitol made me even more convinced that everything I was transmuting in this apartment was linked to the United States federal government. Around this time, since I knew I wanted to watch WandaVision, I decided that I needed to actually watch all of the Marvel movies that I had missed out on the past 6 to 7 years due to my desperate attempt to avoid all reminders of what I had been through while I worked at Marvel. So while I continued to have these intense dreams and purging, I started working my way through all of these movies so that I would be caught up in time for WandaVision's premiere on Disney Plus on January 15th. Since if you don't know about Marvel and all these things, like they're all kind of connected in this one long story. So I kind of wanted to be able to have like the full background when I entered into this show. The day before WandaVision came out, my mala of 3 years broke. And I knew that this was a sign that I was like breaking free of many deep karmic cycles. My phone was also glitching out really weirdly, similar to how it had done back at the end of the last eclipse season in the previous summer. And when I was finishing Avengers Endgame, the night that WandaVision was set to come out, I noticed that my cat Athena was going after something in the corner of my living room right by the door. And I thought maybe it was a cricket because sometimes crickets would sneak their way inside like through my back door. But this was by my front door, and so I was kind of confused. And so I went over to see what it was, and I saw that she was messing with a bumblebee. And I had never seen a bee get inside my apartment before, and I rarely even saw bees around. Like every now and then I would see them, but they weren't something that I saw all the time. And I have no idea how it even got into my apartment because my front door in my living room leads to a hallway inside the building. So it would have needed to get through 2 doors to get into my apartment. I knew that this was a message for me in some way. And unfortunately, because my cat had gotten to it, the bee was a little injured and I wasn't sure if I was going to make it, but I took it outside so that I would have like a fighting chance to live instead of getting killed by my cat. A little while after this, after I finished Avengers Endgame and like done some yoga or whatever, I decided that I was going to sit down and finally watch WandaVision on Disney Plus. And it was a 2-part premiere since the first couple episodes were half an hour. So I watched the first episode and the second episode back to back. And at the end of the second episode, my jaw dropped because it ends with a beekeeper covered in bees emerging from this manhole. And I took this as a very overt sign that TV and reality were continuing to merge into one thing. As January progressed, Biden took office, and I was yet again in a lot of deep emotional purging, especially around the whole Jaws situation. I, at this point, was just so confused by everything that was happening, and I didn't know what I was supposed to do, and I was just feeling really depressed and like still very trapped in a lot of like my emotional struggles that I've dealt with for at this point so many years, and everything in my life felt like a question mark, and I didn't really know, like, at this point, if anything I had been working towards was amounting to anything, or if any of the visions that I had were real, and I was becoming concerned that I was delusional. Like, even though there was like proof that the things that I was experiencing were true, it's like I didn't understand why like my outer reality hadn't matched the things that I had been intuiting. So like the cognitive dissonance of all of this was becoming just really difficult for me to manage. I was feeling very frustrated by all of this because I like intellectually really wanted my emotional body to be stable, but it's like I still didn't have like a full access to that. And so I just felt very exhausted by it, and like my water element had been so polluted, it was just taking a really long time to like make it through all of the alchemy. It got so intense one night at the end of January that the Mahavidya Chinnamasta appeared to me one night, and she like chopped off my head in a vision. And when she did this, I was like sobbing and gagging on the floor, like vomiting, and it was just not a pretty sight. However, a few days after this, in February, I was suddenly and kind of like spontaneously led to work with a woman who helped me to clear a lot of the lingering like subconscious programming around a lot of my emotional body stuff, and it helped me kind of shift out of a lot of the intensity that I was still experiencing around all of this in a way that I hadn't really been able to get to before. That night, after the session with this woman, I had a dream in which Joss appeared to me, and he said that all I have to do is speak my truth and everything will fall into place. So I was like, okay, he's back in LA. The script is done. I'll shoot him an email and be like, hey, you know, maybe you can read this, and if you like it, we can talk about it, and then I can explain everything somehow and get him to go on an apology and restitution tour, and maybe I can salvage this whole situation. Since Joni Patry had said that February 10th would be important, and it was only a few days away by this point, I decided that I was just going to do like a quick minor rewrite on my script and then plan to send it to him on that day. Then February 10th rolled around, and before I could even do anything with my script, the news hit of Charisma Carpenter's post on her social media. And again, for those who don't know about this, Charisma Carpenter, actress, she had worked on Buffy and Angel, and she came out about workplace abuse that she had suffered while she worked for Joss. And then as soon as she came out with this, other people who had been involved in Buffy and Angel started to come out of the woodwork, kind of corroborating her and speaking out their truth about this. And I was like, oh my God, like this is what Joni Patry was talking about. Like February 10th. So I scrapped the original email I was going to send to Joss, and I didn't really know at this point what to do. So I was just like, okay, I'm just going to write a stream of consciousness, like everything that I possibly can about what has happened here. And it's my truth. And I will send him an email, and maybe he will read it and then realize what is happening and take accountability and apologize to everyone. So I wrote this 10-page email in which I attempted to condense everything that I have said in this Erin the Snake Whisperer series into a concise form. And I was like, the UFO truth will be revealed, and all, like, I went through all of these different things. And 2 seconds after I sent this email, like so quickly after I sent it, I heard from a friend of mine who knew what had happened between me and Joss, and also was still somewhat in contact with him. I was basically like, thank you for checking in on me. I really appreciate it. Actually, I was warned about this day. And he was like, whoa. And I was like, yeah, an astrologer. And I was like, she also warned me about February 24th. And he was like, what the fuck? And I was like, yeah, it's crazy. He's like, no, you don't understand. Joss is getting married on February 24th. And I was like, what? Like, this makes no sense. He's like, yeah, dude, this is crazy. I was like, look, dude, I know how crazy this is going to sound, but I don't think this is supposed to happen. And I also feel like this telenovela plot has reached a critical fucking mass, and I'm seriously over it. Meanwhile, more people connected to Buffy and Angel continue to come out with their corroborations and support of Charisma Carpenter, which, again, you can read all this online if you haven't, seen it. And I'm just like, wow, like this dude is really getting karmically slammed right now. And I decided that after I sent this email, like I just needed to lay in wait and finish out the last few weeks of my job and just kind of see what happens. So I'm like scraping my way through February while new articles are coming out like every day, trashing Joss mercilessly. He continues to remain silent, and I never heard back from him. And at this point, I was beginning to doubt that he ever even like read my email at all. But at the same time, I was having all of these dreams that were suggesting that things were being cleared and that things might not end up the way that they were like seeming to end up on the surface. So I was just kind of like still very much in the unknown with all of this. Shortly after February 24th, my source informed me that the wedding had been called off, but that they were still planning on getting married. And so I was like, okay, dude, I guess we're just going to see what happens with that. My job at Cartoon Network ended on February 26th, and 4 days later, I got a call from the owner of my building, and I had never heard from this person since I moved in, and shortly thereafter, the building changed owners. So I had never heard from this person since he came into ownership of this building, but he called me to let me know that they were going to be moving forward with the demolition and that he was seeking to offer me a buyout so that I would leave. At this point, I knew that I was going to have to radically trust and really focus on living from my heart's guidance to be able to kind of navigate how this whole situation was about to unfold, because I knew that my life was about to get cosmically blasted, like between all of the stellium on my stellium stuff in January and February, and then me being so close to ending out this 20-year long Venus Dasha that had given me so much grief. I was just like, well, if this place is a microcosm of the White House, as I suspect it is, then I can't get out of this shit fast enough. So I said to this building owner that while I am in this, career/life transition right now, that I would entertain an offer. And he said that he would get back to me with a number soon. And I also mentioned that I was a psychic medium, and to my surprise, he seemed very interested in this. A week later, he called me back with an offer, and I said that I would think on it. And then we got to talking about spiritual topics, and he had seemingly started to kind of get interested in this himself. And he asked me if I had read this one book by this like Indian mystic, and I hadn't. But then I was like, by any chance, have you read Autobiography of a Yogi? And he was like, actually, I just read that last month. And I was just like, we have a winner. And then I was like, well, you should know then that I am a Kriya Yoga practitioner, and that there have been karmas happening here on this land. And I feel like you should probably know this, since there should probably be some sort of ceremony here in order to like move these energies that I've been processing, like once everyone's out of the building, like before it's demolished. And he was actually very open to this, and he was asking me some questions. And then towards the end of our conversation, he was like, before I go, I have one more question. And I was like, sure, yeah. And he was like, is Babaji still out there? And I was just like, apparently. When I hung up, I could hardly believe that the person evicting me from this place was like asking me about Babaji, and like had just read Autobiography of a Yogi. And like it only seemed to further confirm that there was something about this land that was really important. And to have all this happening as my Venus Dasha was closing out seemed even more intense. Meanwhile, I am basically just in total sloth mode as a person after my job ended, because I basically realized that I had not had like a real extended break at all since before the pandemic began. So I'm just like strung out, having all these dreams and like trying to integrate everything that was happening, because of course throughout all of this, Joss was still getting slammed in the media like all the time. And again, it's like I try to avoid all of this so I don't get like sucked into it all. Like I do really try to mind my own business, but it's just like it's hard to avoid all of this stuff when a person is like famous and going through a very public fall from grace in the media. So I was just kind of like constantly being reminded by, even though I was like trying to just like focus on myself. I also knew in the midst of all of this that at the beginning of April, The Nevers was set to premiere. The first 6 episodes anyway that they had managed to complete during the pandemic before Joss was fired by HBO. And I knew that despite everything, I probably needed to watch it because there would be like important information in it that I probably needed to know. The night before I shifted into my Sun Dasha in late March, my former astrologer appeared to me in a dream, and he told me to get a ruby. And he had mentioned that I would need to get a ruby in the future to me back in the day. And it had been kind of on my mind as I knew that I was entering my Sun Dasha, and like you get rubies to help support your sun. But I wasn't sure if I was going to need it or not. But when I saw him in this dream, like I very rarely saw him in dreams since I cut contact with him. Like I maybe seen him like 2 other times. So I took this as a significant dream, and I began to wonder if I was really going to need to get a ruby soon. My sister is actually a professional gemologist, so I knew I could find a good one with her help. But Jyotish grade rubies are incredibly expensive, and I wasn't sure how I was going to swing it. I also had a dream around this time of the full moon that I was looking at an apartment in Echo Park. And this neighborhood of Echo Park was actually not on my list of neighborhoods to look for apartments in. And I noted this dream as significant because of some other imagery that was in this apartment that I was seeing in the dream. And so I kind of just like put in my back pocket that maybe I should be open to a place in Echo Park if that happened upon my path. Then April rolled around, and by this point, I was beginning to wonder if I was going to be basically like made to go public with my story, because I was starting to feel like I was about to snap. I really, since my truth telling didn't really work in the email version of this, I didn't really know how else I was supposed to speak my truth. And I knew even if I didn't have the dream with him telling me this, I would be feeling similarly, because I had been silent about this for so long, and I had been dealing with the ramifications of this for so long, and I've sacrificed so much, and I was feeling like me coming out with this was somehow going to be inevitable. And so I began joking to Katie that I was going to have to create a TV show called Erin the Snake Whisperer to explain everything that has happened, because it's so convoluted and long and like multidimensional to be able to explain the story. Like, you can't just do it in one YouTube video. But then I was like, okay, you know what? I need to like hold off on doing anything until I'm out of this apartment. Then The Nevers comes out, and Katie and I had decided that we were going to have like a little watch party over FaceTime. Like, we would both watch it at the same time and then like chat about it over FaceTime. And when the final scene happened in the first episode, and there was this, spoiler alert, there was this giant UFO happening, I was like, oh my God, this show has been about UFOs and aliens this whole time. Like, it completely tracks with everything that I've been piecing together with the astrology about the truth coming out about UFOs. And like, then I was like, oh my gosh, like I should have known, because like the Project Blue Book series was also announced at the same time as The Nevers, and like that was obviously about UFOs. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like this, like I'm clearly onto something with all of this. And we were by that point 2 months away from the congressional report that was set to be released about UFOs. And there were articles coming out about it in the mainstream media, like all over the place. And I was like, wow, like Joss clearly has no idea that he is unconsciously channeling about any of this. Meanwhile, I accepted the buyout offer from this building owner, but I didn't start looking for a new place quite yet, because I knew that I needed to have like my money in the bank before I could like go out and do that officially. So finally, on April 27th, I got the check, and the following day I deposited it into my new credit union account, because I was also leaving Wells Fargo and all the big banking whole system as a part of my whole like sacral chakra detox. Like, that had been such a huge part of it, like getting sued by Wells Fargo, all this stuff. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna like leave the big banks, and I'm just gonna like go to a credit union and like start over with all of my whole financial life. Then 2 days after this, on April 30th, it was reported in the media that Joss was suing the state of New York in order to obtain his birth certificate, because apparently there were errors on the marriage certificate dated on February 24th, and he needed his birth certificate to fix these errors. And you know, as we have established in Erin the Snake Whisperer episode 4, he did not know where his birth certificate was, and he couldn't get it the usual way because he had been going by Joss for several decades on all of his identity cards and things and information and documents. And somehow he had just been getting away with this, like, even though his like birth first name is Joseph. So like basically he was having this identity crisis whereby he couldn't like prove that he was really him. And the reason why this matters is because if he was unable to get his birth certificate, the foreign national he had just married would be having to get deported from the country because she would not be able to get a green card. So at this point, I am just like, this TV show has jumped the fucking shark. Like, I am so over all of this. Like, what the fuck is happening right now? But ultimately, I knew there was nothing I could do but, of course, focus on my own shit. So I was like, okay, it's time to manifest a new apartment ASAP because I gotta get the ever-loving fuck out of here by these eclipses in late May and early June. Because if I am right and this place is a microcosm of the White House, then that means... It felt like there was this like mystery that was beginning to unfold in my experience, and that my life wasn't at all in my control, and that all these things were happening like they were somehow planned. Humanity really is ascending in consciousness, and somehow I'm a part of it. I am being like slapped by the universe to wake up to this, and I knew then that this was like a matter of life and death. I've been psychic my entire life, and I had no idea. And on top of this, it was like the universe was conspiring to get me to go on this like mysterious path, and that there's some reason why all this is happening to me. This is so crazy because all of this sounds like the plot of one of Joss's shows. It's like I'm living the plot right now. Somehow, TV and reality were merging into one thing. I am here to be a part of the rise of the divine feminine in Hollywood. It kind of just felt like there was a lot in my life that had kind of set me up to maybe be a part of this in some way. The 2012 thing was definitely a thing, and we were entering into some new time period that we were just getting started with. It wasn't lost on me that I met Joss in 2012, and that everything that I was experiencing was a direct result of the things that had started in that year. The rise of the divine feminine energy on Earth was definitely a major part of it. The root of all of our problems was this imbalance of the masculine and the feminine energies on Earth. You are obsessed with the evolution of humanity. And I was like, yes, you are fixated on the evolution of the species because you are afraid that we are not going to make it. You are here to be a new mythos maker. What is the most important story for you to tell right now? And I said, the story of a girl awakening to the true nature of reality. And he said, what is the true nature of reality? And I said this, holographic universe. You are guaranteed fame in your chart. Saturn is holding it back because he wants you to be fully baked. The age of 31, 2021 is my year of success. All I have to do is make it there. The astrologer went on to explain to me more about the karma in my chart. He said, look, this is loaded, serious karma with you. You are here to dump massive amounts of karma and basically drain the swamp. All of this we see here is in the excretory system of the body. You have a big mission here. Like, this is not a joke. And you've been feeling the responsibility since you were a young child. Responsibility, rainbow. Responsibility, rainbow. Responsibility, rainbow. Responsibility, rainbow. I really have felt like this heaviness all over me, like as long as I can remember, and I just didn't really know what it was. And he was like, yeah, like you've just deep down known that you are here to do something really big. Every time something really impossible needs to get done, Hanuman shows up and he does it. And he's the last one, though, that thinks he can do it. And it's kind of the same thing with you. Your life goals and dreams and interactions with people feel impossible, but Hanuman guarantees that you will do the impossible time and time again in your life. And that I just need to put in the effort. This is because the planets have things that they want me to do specifically. Diamonds form under intense pressure. And this is one of the most pressurized charts I've ever seen. Saturn is pressurizing you, he said. And he's asking you, what is your innovation? Okay, like I am starting to realize that this is a lot bigger than maybe I thought it could even be. I was jolted awake, literally, by a earthquake. I just had this like deep sinking feeling in my stomach of just like how big this could possibly get. Mars in Rahu has the potential for detoxing huge, heavy toxins out of your system. The Capricorn circuit is excretory by nature. Anytime Rahu and Ketu are placed here, the individual shows up to speed the karma in the environment that she is around and in. So you will speed up the karma by nature of interfacing with whatever activity or social community or environment that you are in. We even once got like a private tour of the White House. I remember like standing in the Oval Office and feeling like I really just did not belong there. It activates along these lines to get the most passion squeezed out, the most inflammation squeezed out, the most drama squeezed out. In the doorway was Barack Obama, and he was completely naked. He lunged at me trying to rape me, and I repel him kind of with like my Jedi, whatever force powers or whatever in the dream. He became very angry, and he was walking on all fours, and then he took a giant shit in my hallway, and then he took the fecal matter and he ran down my other hallway and was smearing it all along the walls of my hallway. You were at the top of Mount Shasta with Guru Nath when Babaji himself made an appearance. That doesn't make your karma very light. It's pretty big and brilliant. The collective shadow was about to be transmuted on a much deeper level. If we really were ascending in consciousness, the entire political system would completely dissolve. Decolonization is a prerequisite to any ET contact. He was blasting all of this like cinematic film score in the background, and so I just kept having these like daydreams pop into my head. Like I kept seeing this one over and over again. It was like me walking up to his door looking very concerned, and like all of these UFOs were like flying overhead. I kind of feel like I'm about to be involved in like an international UFO like conspiracy. I am here to help guide humanity through death. And I was just shown like a lot of very interesting visionary scenes of like how I was a part of this greater energetic transmutation machine, basically, to the point where I almost felt like I was not even an individual person. It was so extreme what I was being kind of made to do in that moment that I kind of felt just like I was a like plumbing. Like I felt like I was like the plumbing that shit was coming through. Everything from patriarchal abuse of power, colonization, sexual abuse. I was shown a vision of myself being initiated by indigenous shamans, like in my inner vision space. Like there were maybe 3 of them, and they were working with me and initiating me into deeper levels. I was throwing up, I was shitting, I was crying profusely. I even bled. I knew that it wasn't just my stuff. It was very, very deep, collective energies that I was processing. Ayahuasca was like, you know what you're doing for the world. You know that you're cleaning up like so much shit, and you've been disrespected. I was shown a vision of all of the men in my life who I had loved and trusted who abused me. The ayahuasca shaman, my astrologer, his guru, and of course Joss. Hanuman goes to Sita in the garden and tells Rama that he is coming to get her. And Hanuman is so wrecked with upset about her state because she's Lakshmi embodied. So you can imagine how beautiful she is and how sad she is and how imprisoned she is by this incredible demon, that he sets everything on fire as he leaves Sri Lanka. The earth beneath the White House cracks open and it spreads wider and wider and wider and wider and wider. Before I even know it, the entire White House plunges into this abyss, into this crack. And it was just completely destroyed. Saturn is saying, like, if this little girl who thinks she's so unimportant in the scheme of things nails this forgiveness circuitry before the Sun Dasha begins, she makes a huge contribution that is heard around the world. It's good if you start thinking that you're in this like virtual reality and that you're playing a game. And right now you're kind of just like letting shit attack you, like this fungus and stuff. And I'm like, ugh. And he's like, yeah, like you're player one and they need player one to come online, like stat. You can create your own reality. And it was like all amazing and fun. And then she was like, or you can be sad and mopey powerless girl. And then I would like vomit and vomit and vomit and vomit. She's like, or you can create your own reality. And it would be like, yay, amazing. And then she's like, or you can be all like sad and mopey powerless girl. And I was like, ugh. You are being player 0 right now. And you need to be player 1 now, because player 2 through 400 can't show up if player 1 is down. We are running out of time. You are ferreting out the karma in the world. And it's a huge jump to pull it off. But my money is on you. The entire time I've been living here, I've been the one energetically collapsing the United States federal government, which means I really have been the TV show all along. And if I'm leaving, that means the job is soon to be done. And I will need to do a ceremony to bring this whole process to completion. And the story that I need to tell is my own, because I actually have no idea what the ramifications are going to be in the collective as a result of all of this. Because it's not just the federal government. I've been writing about these UFOs too all along. Like, they are somehow a part of this. And then I was like, man, I've been so hard on myself these past several years going through all of this stuff, but like, actually, I'm amazing. In the midst of all of this, I happened upon a apartment opportunity in Echo Park, and it all kind of happened very organically. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to check this place out. And I walked in here into this place, and I just knew that it was my new apartment, and I got it instantly, kind of like before. And I quickly made plans to move on May 23rd, 3 days before the first eclipse. Around this time, during the first week of May, I had begun to like really detox my apartment in anticipation of this big move. And I found this pouch. And I had totally forgotten I had this pouch. It's like a small little paisley pouch. You know, like random things you just have around that you don't know what they are, and you find them and you're like, oh, right, this. And I hadn't touched this clearly since I had last moved. And so I opened this pouch to see what was inside. And there were 4 items. And all of these items, I realized, were important omens for me. And I was actually in shock. I couldn't believe how, like, I had accidentally passed me, had, like, put all these things in this pouch, threw it in a drawer, and then years later, I, like, saw this pouch, and they were, like, messages that were important for me. So I will show them to you now. This is the pouch. The first thing I saw inside this pouch were these receipts. These receipts are from May 11th, 2013. The day that Joss asked me to come over and help him with Age of Ultron. The day that we basically began our secret friendship. And the day that I had a waking vision of me approaching his house with all of these UFOs flying overhead that I, of course, dismissed as a daydream, but then later realized might actually have some real world significance. And just for proof, to show you that these are the real receipts from that day, I will open them up and show them to you. The first of all, I didn't even remember that I kept these. Like, I couldn't even believe that I still had these. Like, I was like, what is going on here? Like, how do I still have these receipts? Anyway. This one is from the Ralph's on Cloverfield in Santa Monica, where he asked me to pick up some stuff on my way in that morning. Yeah, you can see the items that we got. We got Red Bull, we got TP, we got orange juice, we got half and half, of course. Need all that stuff. The second receipt is from a liquor store in Santa Monica called the Duck Blind, where I purchased one bottle of Flowers wine for him. There we go. So I find these receipts and I'm just like, this is crazy. What else could be in this pouch? Let's find out. The next thing I pull out of this pouch is a copy of the game Pokemon Ruby. Now, I don't even own a Game Boy Advance. Like, this wasn't even my game. I had Sapphire, Ruby was my sister's. I don't know how I even got this. All I know is, I know that I'm supposed to get a Ruby, and this is now confirming to me that I do need to get a Jotish Ruby. After these two things, I was like, what else could possibly be in this pouch? The next thing I pull out is another game. Pokemon X. Of course, the X being the X technology, the UFO secret technology that often goes by the stenography of X, and how, Dark Journalist has been talking about this for all this whole time. Obviously, I've played a lot of Pokemon in my day, but I was like, wow, like, the day that I had these visions of UFOs, like, there's Pokemon X in here, like, I also have to get a Ruby, like, what else could possibly be in this pouch? And then I see the final item. DS Action Replay. And I was like, wait, what is this thing again? It's like some sort of like codes thing. I couldn't even remember buying this. But I went online to look at the description on Amazon, and it says, even the odds by arming yourself with infinite health, bullets, and time. Unlock secret levels, characters, and vehicles. Now you can become all-powerful and beat any game. Action Replay is already preloaded with totally unauthorized cheat codes for all the latest and greatest Nintendo DS games, and you can easily update the Action Replay with new codes. Action Replays contains everything you need to put the power in your hands today. And so as I had surmised back in the winter with all my previous eclipse season downloads, that we were going to be entering into a new level of RPG vibes with this reality. And then having all of these other items be in this pouch, knowing they need to get a ruby, knowing that the X technology is happening here on some level, and how it all connects back to the day that Joss and I started our whole sea relationship that then later became the catalyst for the entire like past 8 years of my life. I realized that these were all telling me something really important. So I kept this in the back of my mind as I continued to prepare to vacate the premises. I was like, perfect. It's time to play this game on expert mode. So in the aftermath of this, it was the second week of May, and I decided, I was just like, okay, I have to make Erin the Snake Whisperer, and I have to do it now. So I started to hastily go into pre-production for this while simultaneously detoxing and packing up my entire apartment and getting all this like, you know, all these like life-changing downloads also were coming in at this time, and informing me as to things that I would likely be experiencing as my path unfolded into this new territory. I also came to the conclusion that if this place really is a microcosm of the White House and the fall of America, it's also a microcosm of decolonization, which means this land can't be used for some new like high-rise penthouse or whatever. This land has to go back to the original indigenous inhabitants of this land. The Tongva people, I believe, are the rightful owners of this land. And that has to be why this building owner like turned out to be like semi-woke, because I need to be able to convince him to do this somehow, is what I was thinking at the time. As all of this was going on, some associates of Nithya Raman, my local LA City Council member, contacted me about the buyout agreement and everything, and they wanted to have a chat with me about it and ask how I was and everything. And so I hopped on a couple of phone calls with them, and I'm like trying to explain to them that I'm totally fine taking the money. I just like, you know, need to inform them that there's these karmas that are happening on this land, and like that there needs to be a ceremony, and that, you know, if America is collapsing, then that means that people who are in city government like would become very important people, like Nithya Raman, like if we become city states kind of thing, is what I was saying earlier about where things are going potentially and all of this. And I also like compiled a whole email to Nithya Raman that they could like give to her so that we could meet and talk about this. But she, of course, did not get back to me. Like they got, these people like did not take me seriously at all. But I was like, well, at least they've been warned. And I also, you know, warned the building owner about this, obviously. And I also warned my one remaining neighbor, who was not really in any rush to take any agreement. And so it was just the two of us at this point by this month, and I was preparing to leave. And so it was a little bit unclear as to how all this was going to shake out on that end. But on top of all of this, my middle sister broke the news to me around this time that she and her fiance were leaving LA after 7 years and moving back to Texas at the end of the month. So we were basically moving at the exact same time, like within days of each other. And my sister had originally moved to LA like right after my Kundalini awakening and right after her graduation from gemology school back in September 2014. And so it felt like a really long-term karmic completion was happening from that time. And I was definitely sad to see her go. I really don't have a ton of people close to me here in LA anymore, especially, family. But I also knew that it was a huge level up for both of them. And so I couldn't really be too sad about it. And mostly at this point, I was just really overwhelmed with everything I knew I had to accomplish by the time that the eclipses were set to hit and I was going to be moving. So I hunkered down and prepared to speak my truth to the world. The weekend before I moved, I began shooting Erin the Snake Whisperer. I shot one episode per day for 4 days in a row, including the day that I moved. And then I took a break to do post-production on the footage that I had and post my first chapter on my YouTube channel on the day of the eclipse and basically like move through that first eclipse energy on the 26th. And as I was working in post, I knew that I wanted to shoot the 5th and 6th episodes still in my old place and possibly even the last one, the 7th one. So I still had some minimal stuff at my old place left over in order to continue to do that. Shortly after I released the 6th episode on YouTube, I went into a massive eclipse, like full system reboot of my entire identity and personality and life. And as the solar eclipse was on June 10th, and it was the first solar eclipse that I was experiencing in my sun dasha, and I knew it was going to be significant because when you're running a planetary period, that planet becomes, very important. And so I kind of suspected it was going to be really intense for me, and it kind of was. And I was having a ton of like major life-changing downloads and dreams and a lot of purging, like just full spectrum intensity. And I knew that it was important that I move through this like eclipse detox period before I commenced work on this final chapter of Erin the Snake Whisperer. I can't really talk about everything that I learned quite yet. A lot of it built upon things that I was getting back in December and January during that eclipse cycle, and it's still like I'm still integrating it, and I'm not really sure how it's going to all kind of come together in the end. But one of the things that I knew from all of these downloads that I can talk about is that it's about to be basically a page one rewrite on this entire reality. And this means that it's time to lay a foundation for a new reality. Like, we now are going to be more than ever empowered to write our own story and change the script from what things used to be. So when I was getting this information about, laying a foundation for a new reality, I was like, okay, this is a great idea in theory, but like I don't really know exactly how to even go about doing this. However, on June 11th, one day after the eclipse, I took a nap and I had a dream. And in this dream, I was trapped in a stairwell with some people. But then an Egyptian girl appeared out of nowhere, and she gave me this like super high-tech key. And it looked like it was a key from the future. And we put it into the door, and we were able to be let outside. Like, it unlocked it, and we got outside. And I was like, wow, that's so striking and interesting. Like, what does this mean? 3 days later, Denise texts me, and she's like, hey, do you want to come over tonight and catch up and meet my friend? Because it's her last night in LA, and I think you guys should really meet. So I was like, sure, yeah, I haven't like had a social interaction in like ages. So I drove over there to hang out, and I met Denise's friend, and her name is Eamon, and she is an Egyptian prophet for the Akashic Records. And she was telling me about a therapy model that she had just developed that essentially works as a kind of timeline jumping technique that will help us bridge our way into this new system as these old systems collapse, as we've established. And I was like, holy shit, like, this is exactly what my dream was talking about, like an Egyptian girl with a master key from the future. And she's like telling me all about like this very genius therapy model that she had basically downloaded, and that it, you know, is in alignment with, you know, physics and sound and time and change and all these things. And I felt like this was the missing link to a lot of what I had been dealing with, because on my end, it's like, yeah, I'm collapsing all this stuff, but it's like, I want to be able to offer people, you know, something to replace it with, and not just like leave it on this cliffhanger of like everything's about to like kind of be destroyed. Because I truly believe that we are going to be kind of screen wiping our way like to the new thing. Like we're going to be creating at just the same pace as the destruction is happening. So it's not going to be like this it's not going to be as jarring, I think, as it could be. And I think the reason why is because we're going to be having, you know, people inventing things like this therapy model that are going to be helping people kind of ease their way into all of this. So we had this whole long evening where we were like trading codes, and I was like learning about this system. And it's at this point that I would love to plug Eamon and her work. And so you can find the links to her videos explaining the system and her experiment below in the description box. And I feel like her work is incredibly important. And so I encourage you to check this out if you are in resonance with my story, and if you feel in resonance with what she is offering over on her YouTube channel. Anyway, after this, I spent the next week and a half basically in like deep integration and yin mode, and like getting more downloads and just like being like in bed, like strung out. And finally, on the day of the full moon, I moved the last of my stuff out of my old place because I just knew I just needed to get it all out, and filmed the last one here. And I did a deep releasing ceremony to clear the energy out, and just really heartbreaking and challenging, and I would say like very torturous chapter of my life. The intention for my ceremony, you know, was not just to clear all these energies and this like really depressing chapter of my life, but also to have this land, if it's in alignment, you know, with the divine will, to have this land be available to be a part of this new foundation for this new reality that we're going to be transitioning into collectively. In this ceremony, I also did a lot of radical forgiveness of everyone who had hurt me in the past. And I forgave my astrologer. I forgave the ayahuasca shaman. I forgave Yogi Raj Gurunath Siddhanath. I forgave this entire reality for being like kind of fucked up right now. I forgave myself. And of course, I forgave Joss Whedon. And I forgave them all because they know not what they do. And I forgave them so that I can be free from all of this. And I forgave them so that all of these patriarchal control systems that I've been processing alchemically through all of my work in that place can completely collapse, and so that something better can be born anew. After all of this, I sang some songs that meant a lot to me, since I knew that I've been needing to like develop my voice, and I knew that the spirits of that land liked it when I sang in the apartment. So I did that, and I offered crystals and holy water I had gotten from from Ganga in India, Ganga water, the river, and I put that on the land. And the following day, I returned the keys, and I knew that I was finally free from that chapter of my life. As I record this, a week after the ceremony at my old apartment, there are obviously still some cliffhangers that have yet to be resolved. For one thing, what is going to happen to America now that I have moved this energy? Again, hard to tell. It's possible that nothing shocking will happen and that it will be like a slower burn, a slower dissolution process. On the other hand, it is America's Pluto return. And while, it's not exact yet, it's getting pretty close. So it's anyone's guess what that kind of energy is going to be impacting this with. And we are, in my view, running out of time to course correct this climate change situation. So I feel like major disruptions may be a necessary part of the process in order to usher in the decolonization process and get ourselves back into a harmonic state with each other and with the planet. Unfortunately, I was not able to convince the owner of the building to give the land back to the Tongva people. He said that it was not possible. Now, if he had watched my videos, maybe he would know that impossible is not necessarily a problem for me. But I don't think he did, at least as of this recording. It's still my hope that this land can be returned to the Tongva people, because I personally feel that it's incredibly important that that happen. The next cliffhanger is, of course, the whole UFOs thing. The highly anticipated congressional report came out a few days after the full moon and that whole ceremony I did at the apartment, and it basically amounted to just some more question marks. And so, it's a little unclear kind of where this is all going to lead. Like, why is the government pretending like they don't know what UFOs are when they've actually known all about this for like upwards of 70 years and, just haven't been saying anything about it? It seems to me like this is something to keep a close eye on. Another question mark is my astrologer. Will he ever wake up to the fact that his sock guru is a fraud and astral rapist? And is he going to return to my life like ayahuasca said? I honestly don't know, but I would love to have my Giles back. I really do miss my astrologer all the time, and I would love to reconnect with him if it is in alignment for the both of us to do so at some point in the future. And speaking of reconnections, another cliffhanger is, of course, Joss Whedon. What is he doing right now? Did he ever get that birth certificate? Will he ever apologize to the people he hurt and engage in the process of transformative justice and restitution? Is he ever going to acknowledge my existence ever again? Honestly, I don't know the answer to any of those questions. As of this recording, I haven't heard from him, and I haven't heard from Jed or Marissa either, for that matter. And maybe I'm just no longer on that timeline of that future vision I saw back in 2017. Or maybe I'm just a delusional person and none of it was ever real and it was just my imagination. Or maybe I am right and that things will shift once I have spoken my full truth. Again, I honestly don't know. And at this point, I just want to be free of this so bad. And so I am yet again doing my best to just move on with my life and pursue my own creative projects and stuff and be okay no matter what happens. I do hope by this point that it's clear that even though this story obviously involves Joss, that I didn't tell this just to trash him, or even to like get attention on myself, because again, I really didn't want to be known for any of this. I told this story because I have a scar down my entire throat and chest that is the mark of my silence. And I told my story because of the karmic implications on the collective that it has as a result of everything that I have been transmuting the past several years. And, I have been basically energetically laundering, all these ancestral karmas, Texas oil industry / petrodollar, like patriarchal control paradigms, like colonialism, sexual abuse, systemic racism, like all of this I've just been like purging through like all aspects of my being. And, I know that I'm not the only one, but at the same time, I can't deny that I've had a really extreme experience and that I've been carrying a lot. And in my opinion, this is all happening because we are at a critical juncture in our evolution as a species. And the serpents are guiding me to communicate this. And ultimately, that is why I made Erin the Snake Whisperer, because I believe that this is a matter of our species' survival, and not just our survival, but our ability to thrive on this planet as one human family. And then, of course, there is the cliffhanger of me. What's next for Erin the Snake Whisperer? Well, at the beginning of the first video, I told you that I had to do something important and that maybe you could help me. Now that you have heard my whole story, I can tell you what that thing is. I am having a dance party, but this isn't any ordinary dance party. This is going to be a spiritual transmission and movement of energy to support humanity's highest evolution and destiny. My intention for this party is that I will link it with the energies of a ceremony that I did in my old apartment the night of the full moon in Mula on June 24th. That ceremony was to clear the energy of that place, like I said, collapse the patriarchal control systems, and create a new foundation. This party, which I will be streaming live on Twitch on the new moon in Punarvasu on July 9th, 2021, is to build on that new foundation by celebrating the dawn of a new age of spiritual sovereignty and the creation of an entirely new reality for the highest good of all. It is also my intention that anyone who shows up to this party get the spiritual activations and detoxification that they need most and that they can reasonably handle. This party is called Transformation Return of the Light Party, and you are cordially invited. It's important for me to be clear that attending this party is your sovereign choice, and I encourage you to attend only if you are ready for a massive spiritual detox and acceleration on your path. It's likely the effects of this will be shamanic in nature, similar to these videos, but ultimately, my aim is for it to be uplifting, motivational, and empowering. So if you are unsure, please tap into your heart place and use that as your compass. And if you're watching these videos, this series, after the date of the party, you may still be able to obtain these activations, as I hope to make the replay available on this channel as well in the future. And if I manage to do this, I will put that link in the description box below. Aside from my party, I don't really know what else is next for me, other than the creative projects that I know I'm meant to work on. But I still have so many questions too, like, how am I gonna make money to afford my rent? Is my Hollywood career ever going to go anywhere? Will I ever get to have a boyfriend? Like, I really, there's a lot that I don't know still. I definitely feel like all of the events that I've been through over the past 8 years have been so extreme, and I have been honestly pretty traumatized by the entire process of getting to this point. I've done my best to see the higher purpose in everything that I've been through, or at least try to keep that perspective. But I also can't deny how hard it's been to just survive these years. I definitely spent a lot of this time like actively wishing I was dead, and dealing with a lot of like emotional turmoil and just depression and anxiety, and it's just been really, really hard. And you know, after all of this, like making it to this place, I would be so like excited to finally see the fruits of my labor. Like, it would be amazing to finally experience what it's like to live, instead of feeling like I'm dying all the time. And on top of this, you know, I'm still integrating a lot of these eclipse downloads and the implications that they have on my life. And so I don't know, maybe that means that at some point there will be an Erin the Snake Whisperer season 2. Or maybe the next show of mine you watch will be the one that I originally set out to create, the show with the native girl lead. That show is called Harmony of the Worlds. If you want to see that show, let me know in the comments below, and let Hollywood know, or like private equity people, because I do think it could be great. And, you know, above all else, I know that I am here to be a storyteller and to create new myth for this new age. And reading all of your messages and comments on my other episodes about how good my storytelling is really warmed my heart like nothing else. I would love the chance to tell my own fictional stories here in Hollywood, and to have that career that I thought I was going to have by now. But no matter what happens, I will keep walking my path wherever it leads me. At the end of the day, all I want is to be liberated from the wheel of samsara and to fulfill my destiny for this life. I do hope that that destiny includes career success and an amazing romance. It's the simple things that I crave the most. Like waking up next to the one I love in the morning, and have that one be the one who loves me back too. I do feel like I deserve these things. And I say this because I know my worth, and I love myself, and we all deserve to be the creators and enjoyers of our experience. in whatever way we feel called to in this life, so long as it doesn't infringe upon the survival and the will of other people. And I believe that this is how we will create a heaven on earth. Anyway, for those who made it this far into my story, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to me, and I hope to see many of you at my party soon. But until then, I guess that means that's a wrap on Erin the Snake Whisperer Season 1.